give you a talk. I hope you will tolerate me for about 15 minutes. I would like to take you to the virtual trip to one of the iconic forests in Europe, Białowieża Forest, which is the last remnant of European primeval lowland forest still existing. First of all, maybe it would be useful to clarify what universal definition of natural forest could be. So natural forests are those which are covering a given area continuously for many centuries and developing without a very significant human influence. And the consequence of this is that they are characterized by a high degree of structural diversity, which means they are usually multi-aged, multi-layered, and multi-species. And the stand also has natural gaps. The other feature is a big number of old, large trees, and also a large amount of dead wood of different forms and also different stages of decomposition. This all results in a high species diversity, especially species which are associated with forest ecosystems. Globally, we have estimated the amount of natural forests is estimated for about 33%. I still personally think it is quite too optimistic picture, but if you go into Central Europe, the picture is not as optimistic. Only 0.2% of deciduous forests are regarded to retain the features of state close to natural. When you look at the distribution of natural forests in Europe, one of the papers a few years back, published a few years back, we can see that they are concentrated in areas which are not easy to access by humans, so mostly mountainous regions where it is not possible to log it and to log them and to convert into different forms of land use. Temperate broadleaf and coniferous forests in Poland more or less look like these ones here. Just a few pictures just to give you an idea how they look like. And of course, they are nowhere near as close in their biodiversity as the tropical ones. I just made a brief comparison for Costa Rica and Poland for the number of angiosperm flowering plants, bryophytes and pteridophytes. So the picture with the angiosperms is not bad. You have only 2.5 times more species here than we do, but it is increasing when you go into bryophytes, 4 times more, and even 10 times more of pteridophytes. Of course, it is due to the different history of the places and the climate. The climate in Central Europe, temperate climate is driven by 4 seasons, like in Vivalis: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And not all the seasons are allowing for vegetation growth. As we know, winter is not. Like in any parts of the world, also European forests are prone to different threats. A few years back, there was a official document issued by the European Community, which specifies particular types of damaging agents, damaging the main threats which are operating in different parts of Europe. So when you come to Central and Eastern, when Poland is located, they are mainly storms, windfall, also droughts, insect outbreaks, but also fires. But the fires are ignited by man because we are not in a boreal zone where it is a natural factor. So some pictures of the Polish forests and problems they face. One of them is drainage. It is due to amelioration, which was implemented for the last decade back, and also accelerated by climate change. Here to illustrate it, I intentionally selected 2 pictures from the wettest type of forest ecosystem existing in Poland, which is wet alderwood, which naturally should be submerged covered with water for a few months per year. It is a natural situation. Whereas quite often it is drained, so the water table is too low, so no submergence and heavy consequences of that. It is mainly due to amelioration, but also drought due to climate change. Yes, drought. This is the extreme example of drought, which we could experience a few years ago in 2019. This is a forest floor of a wet alder wood during the very dry summer, August 2019. Normally, it should form at this time of the year a green carpet, the herb-like vegetation, like on the picture above. But in this case, it resembled rather sort of desert-like conditions. We also have problems with invasive species. I intentionally selected Northern American because I expected some North Americans here. Not to blame you for that, just to give you the illustration of how these plants can, what problems they can cause. One of them is Prunus serotina. This is the stand species, tree species. So we always lose the battle with it, spend a lot of money, but without success, trying to kill it. And also some herb-like species like Solidago gigantea, again, the Northern American one. But also it happens to some native species which are expanding too much in the response of forest management when too much light goes into the forest floor. So they both operate like typical inhibitors of succession, leading to homogenization of the herb-like. And also storms are becoming more and more dangerous for us. So we have even a sort of tornado corridor coming through Poland with repeated strong winds. And these are the effects. Some forest stands demolished a few years ago after half an hour of huge tornado. And also flood can affect forests in Poland, especially after very fast torrential rain. But the bark beetle is one of the main risks, one of the main biotic disturbance agent operating, because it is a natural, it is operating on a Norway spruce, Pizza abies, so kills a lot of stands in Central Europe these days because of the too much drainage, too hot summers, and not enough water during the winters. And last but not least, intensive forest management also contributes to very unwanted transitions in forest ecosystems. But there are, of course, the drivers which are operating globally. I have already mentioned climate warming many times, and I want to pay your attention to the term thermophilization, maybe not known. This is defined as a directional shift in a community composition at the expense of cold-adapted species and in favor of warm-demanding species. There was a paper published a few years ago. This graph comes from that paper, which summarized a lot of European studies, so-called reservoir studies, where species composition was checked after a few decades in the same places, and thermophilization was really present in over 80% of these sites. Thermophilization is accelerated in forests with lower canopy cover because it allows more light to penetrate the forest floor. And these graphs coming from two papers, show it very clearly. The more open the canopy, the faster the thermophilization, the more intensive one. And one sort of global paper talking about thermophilization, which was published a few months ago. I was happy to be among the long list of co-authors of that paper. So it was treating the process in a global way, comparing the situation in forests, grasslands, and also mountain summits. And it appeared that European plants respond to climate change unevenly because mountains are losing cold-adapted species in a very fast pace, whereas in grasslands and forests, the species composition is just enriched with the warm adapted species. And also we can say about something like, which is called climatic death, which means that the pace of the climate change is much faster than the reaction of the vegetation. So plants are no longer in equilibrium with the local climate. So we can expect more changes in this direction. And the last depressing paper concerning the future of the European forests is the one published a few years ago, where authors were analyzing the current and projected future distribution ranges of 12 main tree species building European forests, and they took into account 3 climatic scenarios, and concluded that there will be a group of trees which are classified as losers. There are mainly conifer species. The range will extract very severely, this marked in red color. And they explain it that these species have lower albedo than broadleaf species. That is why they will be losing much more than other species. There will be also a group of, let's say, winners, the ones which won't be affected so much because of the better drought tolerance. So some examples of broadleaf trees. But coming back to the subject of my talk about something more optimistic and interesting, maybe, I would like to take you to Białowieża Forest. It is located in one of the 23 national parks in Poland. National park is the highest way of nature protection in our country, but shame, but they cover only 1% of the country, and Białowieża Forest is on the northeastern part of the country, adjoining the border with Belarus. So the Białowieża Forest complex is bigger, not only on the Polish side, but most of it actually is on the Belarusian side. And on the Belarusian side is the whole area is protected as nature reserve, whereas on the Polish side the picture is a bit more complicated from the administrative point of view, because we have the area of the national park, but also the patches of nature reserves and the yellow space. These are forests which are still managed by state forestry enterprise. So Białowieża National Park covers 17% of the Polish part of the Białowieża Forest. This is the iconic symbol of the Białowieża National Park, European bison living in the wild. Here, some typical picture of the national park. 19% is the share of network of nature reserves, and 63% are forests managed by state forest enterprise, of course with the lighter regime than in other places in Poland, but still managed. But despite this, the whole area of the Białowieża Forest on the Polish side has maintained a lot of natural features. That is why the whole forest complex was included into a European network of protected habitats. It is called Nature 2000, and this protects all the natural habitats existing in Europe. So in the case of Białowieża Forest, 5 of them are non-forest communities and 5 are forest types. Forests dominate, almost 70% is covered by forests, and among them, over 90% is the oak, lime, hornbeam type of forest, like the one you see on the picture. And to value the fantastic features of the forest complex, Białowieża Forest Complex, on both Belarusian and Polish side, in 2014 it was included on a list of UNESCO World Heritage Site. So it meets 2 main criteria which are necessary in order to be assigned included on that list criterion 9, which says of an outstanding representative example of ongoing ecological and biological processes that are significant for the evolution and development of forest terrestrial ecosystems and animal and plant communities, and criterion 10, which tells about the in situ conservation of great biological diversity. So according to UNESCO Convention from 1972, sites which are inscribed on the World Heritage List constitute the common heritage of humanity. So as manager of such a site, there is a great responsibility for the whole humanity. Why Białowieża Forest managed to survive and maintain so many fantastic features of a natural forest? Briefly, I could say the main reason was that for many centuries it was a hunting ground for kings and tsars, and wood extraction was strictly controlled and limited. So it led to the state what we have today. But we have a lot of data about the history of vegetation in this area because of the quite rich collection of paleoecological studies, pollen analysis studies. We know that they work as a sort of typical biological black box. They record all the changes of the vegetation in the pollen profile. So one example of such pollen diagram which help us to understand how the vegetation developed and reached the state which we have today. So after the glaciation, which was finished about between 12 and 10,000 ago, there was a beginning of Holocene. And first of all, we can see on the diagram the post-glacial tundra developing, and then gradually birch and simple birch and pine forests. Then we have elm expansion of hazel, and eventually a long period of the development of multi-species deciduous forests, which we more or less have till today. But when we look at the indicators of human activity, we can see that in the pollen diagram, the pollen from cereals and wheats appear reasonably late compared to other parts in Europe. These are marked here at the top, grazing and primitive agriculture indicators, and also the PWA indicators, which indicate the level of anthropogenic indicators. The significant increase was again very late compared to other regions because it was in late Middle Ages. And also this graph confirms small impact of humans on this region compared to other parts of northern Poland, because you can see here the share of palynological anthropogenic indicators. The wider the silhouette, and the more to the bottom means the earlier the impact started, and the heavier it is. So when you look at Białowieża here, the white silhouette indicates the share of cereal pollen, whereas the black the levels of anthropogenic indicators. So again, we can see that it is a very narrow and starting relatively recently compared to the other parts of northern Poland. Now we can enjoy, especially in the national park, you can admire quite often multi-layered stud profile and high species diversity in the tree layer. These are typical forest landscapes for the Białowieża National Park. We also can say about natural toposequence of forest communities, which develop here without any human intervention, just reflect the natural habitat conditions and the natural relief, which is not an often case in Europe. And it is also a great place to come to study what is the mosaic cycle of forest stand dynamics, because we know from this concept that forest stand is nothing static. It is never the same. It changes very quickly and goes through different stages and different phases of development, like stand initiation phase, then pioneer phase, regeneration, maturation, and eventually optimal phase, aging phase, and disintegration phase, when there is old stand, just dieback of the stand we can see. So if you go for a walk into the national park, you can see a mosaic of forests in different stages of development on a relatively small space. So it is like in a kaleidoscope. Forest is changing very much. So it's a place to study these natural processes of forest dynamics. It was studied in figures by one of our colleagues. He selected 2 plots in Białowieża National Park and also in the managed park part of the Białowieża Forest, in these 2 graphs below. So we can see clearly that there is bigger dispersion, bigger mosaic in Białowieża National Park, so it means more phases represented present here, whereas in the managed part of the forest we can see lack of terminal phase and also low proportion of optimal phase, which is of course the effect of forest management. One of the features of the natural forest is a lot of deadwood, so let's go into numbers, how much volume. Of course it changes very rapidly, but it is estimated that about 1/3 of the wood in National Park, Białowieża National Park, is deadwood. So it is quite striking for someone who is not used to such a landscape that, yes, the volume of deadwood is quite high, over 100 cubic meters per hectare, whereas in managed forest it is slightly more than 30. As this is similar. This more than 30 is similar to other national parks in Poland, but nowhere near as low as in typical managed forest, which is estimated for about 5 cubic meters. So a lot of different forms of deadwood, like impressive great root plates of Norway spruce, or the huge log lane here in the middle of the photograph, the old oak which collapsed in 1974 and still is of that big volume. So different categories of deadwood in different stages of development. So from proliferous studies focusing on the role of the deadwood, we know perfectly that it is a key element critical for the preservation of the biodiversity of organisms, which depends strictly on deadwood as a substrate. These are epiphytic species, and also the ones which eat xylem or cambium, and also other forest species which like this kind of substrate use it. So our colleagues also made the study in Białowieża, so we know from that 50% of the species living in the forest are associated with deadwood. It just gives us the idea how much we can lose once we remove the deadwood from such a forest. Quite often logs contribute to the fossilization of the regeneration of new generation of trees, because they just allow new seedlings to grow in a space which is free from competition like it is in a forest floor. So we call them maternity logs. Logs and stumps are also perfect environment for over 200 species of vascular plants which prefer such a substrate. And quite often we can have something like so-called ghost trees. Just the step pattern of the species distribution in the herb layer, which is a legacy of former log. They were growing on the log, which decomposed, and now only the different species growing in the line indicates that there once was a log which decomposed. Where there is a log of deadwood, there is a lot of macrofungi. So all these macrofungi confirm the continuity of ecological conditions and also the constant presence of deadwood in various forms and different stages of decomposition. If you go into numbers, we can estimate the number of macrofungi growing in Białowieża for over 1,800 species, which is 43% of species from Poland. And among those, 20 species are totally unknown from other localities in Poland. So Białowieża is the only place where they were recorded. One of them is this one, fungus growing on big big logs of that northern spruce. In Poland, in Białowieża is the only location where it was recorded. Maybe it is worth paying attention into polypores. In Europe, we have in total almost 400 species recorded, whereas in Białowieża itself, it is more than half of it, 210, which equals 90% of all species from that group which were listed for our country. Vascular plants, over 1,020 species recorded here, which is half of the flora of lowland Poland. In total, in Poland, we have between 2,800 to 3,000 species, and so this number is maybe not very spectacular, but we should pay attention to 115 species which are regarded as indicators on ancient forest habitats, because these 150 species means 74% of all species from that group which occur in Poland. So again, it confirms continuity of ecological conditions. The same refers to bryophytes, about 200 species of mosses and over 70 liverworts, including many species which are regarded as forest relics. Many species are epiphytic, that means associated with deadwood, and epiphytic. I don't have to translate what is epiphytic here. So many of these bryophytes are also species specific, and what's more, some of them are restricted to particular small niches in particular place on a trunk, not occurring in other parts of the trunk. And some examples of such bryophytes which are rare in a scale of whole Europe. The same refers to lichens. About 500 species present in Białowieża forest, which equals to 30% of species from that group which are known from Poland, and many of them are again forest relics and typical for natural undisturbed forest ecosystems. One of them worth mentioning is maybe Lobaria pulmonaria, because it is classified as an umbrella species, which means it requires the creation of bigger protection zones in order to efficiently protect the species. It is a prime-of-a-forest relic, epiphytic tree-dwelling lichen. And some other ones which are critically endangered in Poland. And the Białowieża forest is the only refuge not only in Poland but throughout the Central European lowlands. Insects. Of course, it is difficult to specify how many species there are exactly, but it is estimated over 12,000. And again, many of them are regarded as typical species associated with old growth forests. Some of them are critically endangered. Many of them are xylophagus and cambium eaters, like these three examples of saproxylic beetles protected under the Nature 2000 network. And Białowieża forest is one of the last remaining refuges for these species in Europe. And birds. You won't be impressed having so many birds in Costa Rica. I know it's over 900 species in birds in Costa Rica, which is more than you can find on the entire the northern continent. Yes, it makes great impression, but we also can impress you with the Białowieża birds, which is they are counted for 250 species, including 153 species which are nesting in Białowieża. So many of them are also protected by European law, like so-called European Bird Directive. And what we normally know from the papers about the behavior, the biology of birds, was studied in forests which were more or less converted by human, whereas here we have a chance to study really the preservation of the original evolutionarily inherited way of life of many birds. So it is a great place because we can say that this forest is a window to the ecological past of Europe's forest. And also the comparison in Białowieża forest is more species birds than in the entire British Isles. Some two examples of endangered species in Europe, two woodpeckers, white-backed woodpecker and three-toed woodpecker, both restricted to natural forest. They need to drill the hollows for the nest each year in a big log, spruce log, Norway spruce logs. And when you go into mammals, together we have 59% of mammals in the Białowieża forest, and which is 70% of Poland's lowland fauna. And the Białowieża forest is one of the richest refuges of mammals in Europe because there is almost a full set of natural fauna which occurs in temperate forests, European temperate forests. And of course, the leader in this group, the most iconic species, European bison, the biggest European mammal. And last year, the counting allowed to say that we have over 1,200 individuals present in Białowieża forest, and they form the largest white-head living in the world. Of course, there are also representative of predators, a gray wolf, and the European lynx. And the lynx, maybe it is worth mentioning that its individual ranges are 10 times smaller than in other parts of Europe. And one of the main explanations of this pattern is that availability of food is much bigger here than in the entire Scandinavia. The main species it hunts for is roe deer, so it is estimated that the population of roe deer is bigger than in entire Scandinavia. This is red deer, also very rich population, very big densities. This is the main food for wolf, and roe deer for the lynx. I would like to also mention beaver, because beaver is regarded in ecology as engineering species. It is called like that because we know that it builds dams, and dams means ponds. Ponds means killing the forest around the pond and within the pond. And then eventually the pond is filled with sediments, the grassland community comes back, and then eventually tree colonization is possible and the forest returns. And that is why it shapes the forest landscape very distinctively. Wild boar also exists in these forests. Quite often it is regarded as a species which has a negative impact, especially in the introduced ranges, but in natural forests it plays important role, biological role. Its main activity, as we know, is rooting, and it is an omnivore, so it roots for the food, different source of food, different parts of plants, below ground and above ground. Also mushrooms, small animals, and even carcass. One of the favorite food for wild boar is this early spring geophyte Ficaria verna because it produces tubers on stems and roots. It is called potato rain. So it is a favorite food for whitebone. That is why it occurs in wet forests. So quite often they are rooted for that reason. And one would expect that it is detrimental for the species, but the picture actually is the opposite. Studies conducted in Białowieża forests prove that Ficaria verna develops faster in plots which are rooted compared to the ones which are not visited by the whitebone. The same refers to the other vernal species of the herb layer, Dentaria bulbifera. It creates rhizomes. Of course, whitebone eats the rhizomes and reduces the biomass, but stimulates the division of and the formation of new rhizomes and formation of new individuals. So overall, it has the positive impact on that species. Yes, all these features I just presented to you should be the only reason why you hear about Białowieża forest, but a few years ago, there was a different reason why there was a big, loud, discussion in media, not only in Poland, but also abroad. So these are just screens from records about Białowieża forest, and the reason was not the spectacular nature, but a spectacular outbreak of bark beetle, and actually not outbreak itself, but what happened afterwards, because our former minister of that time decided to this is the small beetle, decided to implement salvage logging, even in forests which are protected, and it should never be implemented. But why so much spruce in Białowieża forest? I told you that broadleaf communities predominate, yes, but as this part of Europe, forests in this part of Europe resemble quite much the boreal zone. They are called pre-boreal types of communities. The natural feature of them is natural presence of spruce in all forest communities, including the broadleaf ones. So it is a natural component. It may occur as a mixture, but still occurs even in the broadleaf communities. And the history of outbreak in Białowieża forest is quite well recorded, especially after the Second World War. So we know that it occurs from time to time, depending on the hydrothermic index. Once the conditions which prevail the development of this insect are existing, the year after the outbreak comes. The last outbreak, which started in 2015, was quite a big one and killed most of the spruce in the forest. But we should bear in mind that the whole complex is the UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it is divided in 4 zones, UNESCO zones. Zone 1 is strict protection zone. Zone 2 and 3 are partial protection with different regime, but any silviculture and management activities are allowed only in the Zone 4. Whereas the minister just broke the rules and implemented salvage logging even in nature reserves, and this is actually the first time in the history of this forest where harvester was used for that purpose. So lots of clear cuts appeared as a consequence of this not wise decision. It was studied by our colleagues from the satellite images. So we know that between 2017 and 2018, where the clear cuts were implemented, almost 700 hectares were cleared, including over 200 hectares of old growth stands. So it contributed to great fragmentation of this forest complex. And of course, raised lots of protests, not only in our scientific environment, but also in public attitude. So NGOs and people, just society started to defend the forest from such activities. What we know from the experience of the German colleagues in the Bavarian forest, who also experienced similar outbreak about 2 decades earlier, that in order to be successful in outbreak control, you need to eliminate 80% or preferably 100% of insects that are they should be quickly detected and removed before they infest new trees. We understand that it is possible only in typical forest plantations, whereas in forest complex, big complex, where there is a pattern of protected areas, where it is not allowed. Such activity doesn't make any sense. Just makes a lot of disturbance and doesn't help to conquer the insect. So salvage logging is allowed only in managed wood-producing forests. As ecologists, we don't recognize bark beetle as a pest. Of course, in typical production forest, it is a pest, but from the ecological point of view, we name it as a keystone species because it promotes a lot of ecological and biological processes in forest dynamics, which are very good for the biodiversity and for the maintenance of the forest. One of them is they are a food for woodpeckers and also provide the substrate where the woodpeckers drills their hollows. It also attracts many predators, insect predators, which are feeding on bark beetle. It is proved that over 100 of species of insects can be attracted after such outbreak. There are also gaps in the stand, which can be occupied by oak, because oak needs light to germinate and grow. And also the dead wood is an excellent substrate for many organisms from different groups, and we already know. Also, the studies conducted in Bavarian forest prove that the survival of Norway spruce seedlings is much better when salvage logging, elimination of the logs is not implemented, but logs are left in situ, because the corpses of parents of the new generation of spruce is an excellent substrate which facilitates the growth of such seedlings, whereas in a mineral soil, which appears after the salvage logging, the mortality of such of young spruce is quite high. It also is proven in some parts of the Białowieża National Park that no intervention after logging is the best scenario. Here was an outbreak some years before, and you can see that forest still exists, just turned into different phase. And we have cohorts of trees of different age and different species, which means that in the future, this forest will be less prone to outbreaks. And in the end, maybe it is worth mentioning one of the papers of a very famous forest ecologist, Australian forest ecologist, David Lindenmayer, who wrote a lot about logging and how harmful it is for the ecological processes just in natural forests. This title tells us everything about it. Please don't disturb ecosystems further means that logging is regarded as severe, much more severe disturbance than the initial disturbance, like outbreak in this case. And the good news came last week, just on the 19th of June, because on that day, our Minister of Environment, Climate and Environment, signed a long-awaiting document, management plan for the Białowieża Forest, World Heritage. We were waiting for that for 12 years after battles with stupid former governments and other other things. Eventually, we managed to achieve this step. So it is a big step towards a long-time protection of the Białowieża forest for the future generations. It takes into account the recommendations made by UNESCO missions. There were a few UNESCO missions visiting this forest after the outbreak and logging, and also recommendations made by IUCN. So the key points of the management plan say that 96% of the total area of the Polish part of Białowieża forest should be maintained, left without intervention, left for ongoing natural processes of forest dynamics. So far it was 37, so it is a great achievement, great thing for the forest and its future. Also, it will be prohibited, hunting will be prohibited within protected area, and existing rules which regulate allowance to the tourists will be maintained, so tourists can come and enjoy the nature, and also the local communities, their needs will be fulfilled, so they will not suffer from the fact that the forests around are not possible to be used commercially. So I think we are on the same step, the same direction as you are here in Costa Rica. Once you notice that deforestation is very bad, and you turn this process, stop the process and turn into a opposite, reforestation. So I think we agree with that statement that we have not inherited the earth from our ancestors, but we have borrowed it from our children. So thank you for your attention. It would be nice to have questions. Yes.
And is it found in other parts of the world where it is, brought in with wood or something and it causes problems, or does it just occur in
No.
natural areas?
Bark beetle, there are many species of bark beetles. This one operating on Norway spruce, Pizza abies, is operating naturally in Europe, as far as I know, and because we suffer from climate change, means very hot summers and very dry winters with no snow cover, and spruce is a sort of oligothermic and moisture demanding species. It suffers a lot, so this is a natural consequence of that weakened trees are prone to these infestations, because if a tree is in a good health, it has the natural mechanism to defend itself from bark beetle. But I know that, for example, in Czech Republic, they stopped fighting with bark beetle because they decided that this doesn't make sense. You just have to allow the nature to work and convert the forest into something different if this climate, Norway spruce doesn't have a chance. No more questions? Thanks very much.